guys, here come the dollies. They got fresh sinkers, hot coffee, and the sweetest smile.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Clubmobile. We are so happy that you've joined us.
Hi everyone, good morning.
Joining us today is our friend and historian, Cara Lebonick. Cara, we're so happy to have you here. I feel like we've been talking to you for so long, but we've never actually had the opportunity to sit down and talk to you. So welcome.
Yes, it's been great. It's been really cool to kind of follow you guys earlier and then podcast and then see the connections to all of the different overlap that we have. That is really an impressive amount.
Mm,
It
it
is.
really is so much, and it's been such an enjoyable experience to get to know you through that, and I'm excited to know even more. Um,
Tell us
I
everything.
yeah, I want to start with where you went to school and how you got to where you are now.
I have lived many lives is a thing that I like to say a lot of times. So I actually started like as a kid when I was growing up, I read a lot. I had a really strong, influential grandmother in my life, and she like had been an English teacher and then retired when I started kindergarten so that she could help take care of me. And she was this huge part of my life and brilliant woman. She was an English teacher, like an honors English teacher at the high school in town. And so it's something that I think I always knew like you're going to go to college and you're going to have this career. But I think that if you kind of trace that like historical knack, it goes back really far. I mean, like when I was into the Backstreet Boys, I would take notes about them and the things that they were interested in and then follow like their influences. And then I got into like Green Day and then I was like, okay, but where does Green Day come from? And traced it back. And then I get into like the Stiff Little Fingers and like have always been such a nerd about like how do I pull this out? How do I need to know more about this thing. How do I pursue it? Um, but then I actually went to college first for electronics and I was a trained electrician and I burned my hand on a hibachi grill where I was waitressing and I
Oh my
couldn't hold a
gosh.
screwdriver.
Oh
And so
God.
just could not physically hold a screwdriver and could not do electrical work anymore.
Oh my gosh.
I started really pursuing the idea that I could make a living out of this interest I had in history. And so I was at this junior college. I finished my electronics degree there and then went to the Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, SIUE. It was, it's a great college. It's really nearby. I did not have any money, and so I was going on scholarships and as much as I could. Um, and then I had some really great history professors that enter the scene and really start pulling that influence. My grandma had just died, and it was really great timing for me to take on some new people. I had this incredible instructor named Dr. Kate Surgeon, and she specialized in medieval women's weaponry, which was not a thing I knew you could do. And she was so incredible, and I am in encountering these people who are very animated and passionate about studying history and and this is in like my undergrad still,
Mhm.
she focused on primary sources in such a way that I was like, oh, yes, there are new things we can learn from what already exists and new ways that we can think about programs. So then I went to I have a master's in history and museum studies from the same university because that history department is stacked. That staff are incredible. Dr. Fowler and Dr. Brian Jack are two individuals who really have helped me. I'm still friends with them today. We still connect a lot. And so with their influence, I went ahead and got a graduate degree in this history. It taught me how to think critically, it taught me how to look for primary sources. It probably was the start where I started isolating the time period and the subject matter for my very specific interests. And I'm really strictly American and really strictly like early 20th century. So I start drilling it down at that point. And like I said, I have these incredible mentors, incredible influences through this graduate school program. And I'm getting both sides of things. I'm getting history, but I'm also getting museum studies. And museum studies is so fascinating to me because it's the question of like, like I said, I grew up a poor kid. And so it's always a question of like, okay, what are you going to do with this? You have a master's degree in history. What are you going to do? It doesn't do anything. And so the museum studies side of it really pulled out like, no, you can make this a career. And I wasn't sure really what I wanted to do. Um, Teaching, and I was getting my degree paid for because I was teaching.
Mhm.
So they had an amazing program. And again, the Dr. Jack and Dr. Fowler both were really essential in the like, this is how you access what's available to you. They helped me apply for the assistantship. They helped me get through the program and apply and get in and get it paid for. Um, and so then they helped me get into this master's program. In the course of the master's program, there's a required internship, which is brilliant. That's such a good way to structure requirements for the real life application of find out now if this isn't what you want to do. Obviously, I made a big change when I had been an electrician and then was like, you know what, I'm going to go to grad school for history. So I think that's a really critical point of like, try it out if you can have access to it. And I picked my internship based on which one paid the most because I couldn't take a free internship that wasn't accessible to
Right,
me
right.
uh, for where I was in my life. And so the assistantship really helped, and then the internship that's like required to finish this program. I ended up there was I live just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and we have a National Archives location here who used to have a student intern program. And I will be real honest, when I started, I was like, this is the highest paying one. Check. I'm not super into military history. To this day, I would say military, like unit information, isn't the thing that's going to ever pique my interest. It's not the thing that I'm going to be like, yes, what military tactics have we used and how has this grown over time? That's not really it, but it's always been the people side of things. And I had a very quick mentor when I was doing the student internship at the National Archives. Um, and she very quickly like recognized that I had some of those necessary skills to think about how to bind records and how to think in an archival researcher way. Um, and so she very quickly took me under her wing, became a great mentor for me. She had this other uh, friend at the agency. So when she left, I inherited a new mentor. So this is Ashley and Teresa. And so that's where I am now. I work at the National Archives at St. Louis. Um, and I have been there since 2013. That's when I started as a student when I was still in my first couple master's programs. Um, and then I went back to school and pursued my PhD at St. Louis University and had again just another incredible staff there. Dr. Ben Looker was my advisor. He again is somebody who I'm still in contact with, and he was really influential in like again helping refine what I'm interested in. And SLU has this American Studies program, and American Studies I think is where I have landed. If you were to ask me what's your discipline, I really think that I would land on American Studies because it's this like multidisciplinary approach to how you can understand history. And for somebody I'm very people focused, I'm very interested in like, who are the actors in this story? This stuff doesn't exist. Even the records that we're looking at, the records that we look at every day they don't exist without somebody having made them. Somebody had to, this is a person's record. Somebody made this record. And that's really kind of where I've landed in terms of like the stuff that I'm interested in. I really kind of drill it down to like St. Louis, the New Deal era, um, basically, you know, pre World War II and back. Um,
Mhm.
and I think those are really the things that have shaped me a lot. I also I had this really great period of my life where I was at the National Archives, but I was not working directly with the records. I was working on this communications team. And in terms of like understanding what all the breadth of what's available at our agency and across everything, that experience was just incredible for me. It really opened my eyes. It allowed me to pull back my lens. Again, I had incredible people that I was working with. That team was just like one of the most influential in terms of like, okay, so now you're established in your career, and they're like, but you can still be a person. And that experience, I think, was really critical for me. I'm back working directly with the records now, thank goodness, because that has connected us. And it's really uh, many lives have led to this moment.
It's amazing. It- I have so many friends that have gone from one thing and then completely jumped to
Hmm.
something else. I had one friend that was a hairdresser. She did hair and beauty at college,
Yeah,
and now she is a scaffolder.
nice.
So I don't know how that
Great
happened,
height.
but
Yeah,
yes, I'm terrified of heights. Um, but
you're right.
yeah, it happens all of the time. I always think it's absolutely incredible. Um,
Yeah,
was
his
there
hairdresser is a now, and she's so smart. It's so cool.
yeah, was there anything about is there anything about World War Two that you kind of center in on?
Um, I mean, definitely the New Deal. The New Deal programs, the idea of what the New Deal is doing, pulling us out of the Great Depression era. And I mean, in terms of like the development of a society, the development of ways that we care for, provide for, thrive in a society,
Yeah.
allow for the most people having access to their full potential, I think is like really fascinating to me, and how this time period really is like it's beget of tragedy. We have like World War I has passed, which is called the Great War because we'll never have another one of those, right? This is
Right.
terrible. We don't ever want to do this again. And then we hit this huge slump. We have the Great Depression. We have all of these changes. I mean, our country's still relatively young. And then um pulling us it's the development of society and what's happening at this time. And I mean, I've always been really fascinated by people who kind of like take their opportunity when they're not given opportunity. And so we're seeing, I think the shift of like the labor movement is really fascinating. It's hard for me to narrow it down.
Same for us.
Women women are doing amazing things at this time, and they're really, I mean, they're getting more empowered. Obviously we have the 19th Amendment, which gives some women access to vote,
Right.
under the guise of giving all women the access to vote. But of course there are, continued attempts at restrictions, and I mean, not even successful attempts, um and so just like the lightning speed with which society is changing and developing in this time period. And then we go into another war. And I mean, go into it hesitantly at that. And so I think all of that is so fascinating to me. It's so otherworldly to think that these people lived through these realities that wartime and what that is, and
Yeah.
then back from war and what that does to society. And so I think, like, when I when I've done studying, I think it's always the what are people doing? How are people responding?
Right.
And I think I'll go back to Dr. Surgeon, who kind of was like, where I study medieval women's history. That's not something that people were writing about. So when I study these primary sources, I'm finding the story that's not immediately told. I'm not, if you think medieval times, you're thinking like, what story that about kings and queens, what monarchies, what barons. But she's like, no, I know what normal people are doing. I know how Joan of Arc comes to rise. I know how all of these, and I think that's the fascinating story for me is what are the people doing in these stories?
Right.
How
Right.
you read between the lines. And I, again, back to the American Studies discipline, is like all of the different ways that you can read, primary sources. Children's literature as a primary source is cool in American studies because you can be like, what is this? How do you read the cultural telling of what's happening here? And there's so much that's happening in this, massive World War II gaps on both sides, before and after era, Harlem Renaissance. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think
I
it's so
just,
cool.
it really, no, it really is so cool because it just, it does. And like the way you say, like, it really boils down to what were regular people doing in their
Mm-hmm.
lives. I mean, you look at a time like the 1930s when so many women were deciding, like, well, Amelia Earhart can fly a plane, Charles Lindbergh is going across the country. Well,
St. Louis
you know what?
Spears.
I don't want to sit home and just raise children and cook dinner and clean my house. If they can do it, why can't I get up in the sky and do it too?
Yeah.
And it really sheds light on what the average person would
Yeah.
do to step up and show I'm not just going to sit back on the sidelines. I'm going to get myself involved. And this is regular, everyday people.
Yeah. There's a time period where women, this is before and after suffrage
Hmm.
gets mostly granted, partially granted. Um, and they're these like society Black women, and they're called club women, and their motto is lifting as we climb. And that to me is like such a perfect encapsulation of like this is this is advancement
Yeah,
driven by a person who maybe did not have equal access before. And that story will grab me every time. I mean, I love an underdog.
Yeah. I
definitely.
feel like we're very much the same, and that's why we've got so into all of the things that we have talked about so far in different episodes. It always seems to be the ones that are treated the least well that we
Yeah.
have sort of latched
Yeah,
onto,
Yes.
especially the wasp, because it was essentially snatched from them. The rug was
they
pulled
were,
out from
oh
under
my
them.
God, they were classified as an experiment for years.
Yeah.
Just an
Yeah.
experiment.
Yeah. That's
All that hard work, and it wasn't even recognized until the late 70s. It's
Any
just,
continues to struggle. So this is going to be like little teaser for your podcast host or your podcast listeners. I'm giving a presentation. The National Archives does a series called Know Your Record series. And I'm going to give one on the women's air service pilots and kind of tell the trajectory using our records because when they're in, 1943, 44, even when they're the women's airfaring service and they're kind of getting set up and figuring out their lives,
yes.
um we have those records. They're considered federal civil service employees of the Department of the Army Air Force is what's called at the time. And so we have all those
Mm,
individual personnel folders.
that's
And
amazing.
but then the story twist, and those records by themselves, incredible. They're
Mm.
so cool. They've got some of my favorite like records and an individual, what's your favorite thing to find in a record kind of question.
Mhm.
is beget of working with those records. Actually, one of the mentors I talked about, Ashley, she wrote a really great article about them in like probably in 2013. Um, but then the story twists because these incredible women continue to talk to each other and continue the Order of Fifinella. So cool. Um, and they are the women who are like shoved back home and they have maybe some reunions for a couple years. They have this itch to fly again. But at the same time, they're raising kids and they're having this story and this like, this isn't nobody talks about this. Women weren't in World War II.
Right.
Um, and especially like no Black women served as WASP. There's, a Native American woman, there's a couple Asian American women.
Right.
So there's
Right.
a little bit of a mix, class-wise, very diverse. Um, and so then we skip in the 1970s, they have this like reunion. They talk to Hap Arnold's son, Bruce Arnold, so cool, who's like, I'm with you on your fight. And they fight and they get partial military benefits successfully 30 freaking years later in 1977. And then now they have military records. The Air Force branch took their civilian records, copied them, made them military records. And so it's so cool, the, institutional history and the story of their fight, I mean, is one of my favorites for sure.
Mm.
One of ours too. I definitely feel like I remember reading, and when you can tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I remember reading that one of the things that really flipped the decision to give them military status or veteran status was that their discharge from
Mhm.
the Women's Air Force Service pilot, their discharge papers said honorably discharged from service with the U.S. Army Air Force.
Yeah.
And the women said, well, if I wasn't part of the Air Force and if I wasn't part of the war, then how come I was honorably discharged from the Army Air Force? And I
Yeah.
think I remember that being what really flipped the vote to give
Yeah.
them military status.
There was one Congress person who was like really holding out and
Yeah.
really the objector. And somebody passed that the story is, somebody passed that paper over
Hmm.
one of the documents. And I mean, to call it a discharge paper isn't they couldn't have taken that like to the VA and gotten
Right.
benefit. It's not that, but it is. I mean, they're serving on bases. They're flying with military pilots. They're flying, helping train military pilots, and they have to have, a captain or officer of whatever level sign off on some of their stuff. Hap Arnold signed some of their papers.
These women flew the B-17, the
So
B-29, the B-29. I'm like, I see the size of a B-29 next to a
Oh,
B-17, and
it's
I'm like,
huge.
I'm floored at the fact that there was 11 of them that flew the
yeah,
B-17. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a massive plane. Then I
yeah,
see a picture of the B-17 next to the B-29. I said, oh my God, look at the
yeah,
size difference. Look at the
yeah,
size difference. The 29 is tremendous.
yeah. I
Mm.
really like that
They
story.
got in it. They got in it with no fear. Nope. You want me to fly it? Okay, I'll fly it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, the Silver Wings book has
Love
that
that
incredible
book.
story too about how like the men were afraid to fly it because it had
Mm-hmm.
some trouble coming off of the line, and so they brought in the women because then it'll like emasculate the men if they won't fly it too, which is like such a good story.
That's it.
It worked. It worked
It did
in
work. Yeah.
everyone's favor because the women got to fly this tremendous
Yeah,
plane. But also, I always find it incredibly funny that after that they said, "Oh, we better get in it and we better fly
Yeah.
this
Oh,
thing
the girls
because
just flew it. We better,
we're
you
gonna look a
know,
bit silly otherwise."
light a fire under our ass and get in there.
Right?
But
yes,
Would you say the wasp was your favorite rabbit hole to fall down? Because we love a good rabbit hole. We're constantly digging ourselves into them and not escaping out of them.
always.
Or do you have another historical rabbit hole that you find yourself Alice in Wonderlanding down?
yeah. I mean, I would say it is my current rabbit hole.
Mm.
Hmm.
Um, but there have been so many. I was really deep into the code breakers for a long time, the World War
Mm.
II era female code breakers. And it was right before Eliza Mundy wrote, which is also an incredible book. And so I think the first thing I do when I open a book now, so I've got some books next to me right now. And the first thing I do is always say, like, did you use our records? Did you look at the National Archives records? It's always like the first thing that I look at. And honestly, very often they don't. There are so many like administration level records that help
Right.
review, and really is a great, like, in terms of a researcher, and then like somebody who is like a trained researcher. I think that this is, for me, that's my entry point as like the top of my rabbit hole is how do I find out what these groups are, so then I can find out their individual person stories and the struggles that they encountered. And so had this other rabbit hole that was into the code breakers, and I love the code breakers story because every time I pulled on that thread a little bit, I would find a new heroine. I would find some new incredible woman who has this incredible story. Um, my it's kind of like it's one of my rabbit holes that I put a pin in to come back to, because there's this all black female unit that was headed by William Coffey, and they have this incredible story, and their records are kind of hard to find. And that's, I mean, like, the story of women is that the records of women are historically hard to find, and part of that's because of the societal demand of a name change. The If there's multiple marriages, those ones in between, those names are like erased from history. We don't talk about that. And so, but if they were in service at that time, I need to know that name to find that record. And, so very often I find that researchers will start at the administrative records level because they're looking at how the record was organized. They're looking at how these people were classified, how these projects were classified. Like you mentioned, WASP being an experiment for a long time. And then there's just such a wealth of information at that level that unless you're following a case study, and thank goodness there are so many wonderful researchers out there who are they find their topic and they find their rabbit hole while the individuals are still alive. And so they'll use like personal papers and oral histories and getting to tell your own story. And usually I find that when that happens, they don't go then into like a personnel record level. But so I did Code Girls was a big rabbit hole for me for a long time. I actually started my history journey studying the Black blues musicians from St. Louis. And
That's interesting.
that was really such a good study of community and the ways that like these people who were not given any access to anything still organized and created this community and taught each other the piano and the trombone and the clarinet and singing. And Louis Armstrong's going up and down the river and he's in St. Louis sometimes, and Jelly Roll Morton is from St. Louis. He was one of the union leaders for the musicians union in St. Louis. And like the way that you're creating forest community, but then what you do with that and that
Mhm.
agency retake has always been really fascinating to me. So like I have a never ending list of rabbit holes. I mean, I have like notes on my phone, like Charlie Day and It's Always Sunny, where he's got like walls of Pepe. That's me all the time. I've got notes everywhere of like new things I'm going to pull threads on. Anytime I see anything, like y'all have posted some stuff. Um, just every different version of like, oh, would we have a record about that? Let me pull on this one. That's always where
Yeah.
I go. And I think that getting to focus more recently on understanding military records more, I've really made it my mission
Mhm.
to really get into those. And then when you guys asked me about Bremen, and finding more information on Bremen. Such a perfect rabbit hole for me because I was just coming off of Masters of the Air, and I was like, okay, I know this stuff. I know that we're going to have this stuff. I know that we have something about this. Let me find every little pinhole I can crawl into and research in every way possible and all these different resources that I have. And I mean, the team that I work with now is such an incredible group. I get to work with one of my best friends. And my other best friend, Ashlyn, gets to just hear me talk about it constantly. Um, and so the team that I have now are so supportive and so incredible. And I can go and ask them any question at any time and be like, hey, you know about this thread. Hey, you know about this thread. And we have such a good collaborative working group that as a researcher, that's what I get to do for a living. And it's so fun. And it's like, I'm a professional rabbit holder.
I want to do that. I
Yes.
mean, we kind of do. We sort
We
of
kind
thought,
we do. We kind of do, and I think I wouldn't say we've built. We are, I think, continuing to
mm,
build a community around us and around the podcast where, and I say this all the time, that the World War II community as a whole is just such a supportive group of
Yeah,
people.
mm,
I don't
yeah,
think there's
fun.
anybody that we've crossed paths with in the almost year we've been doing this where I've said, mm,
yeah,
I get an inky feeling about them or no.
yeah,
Everybody has been so kind and so, oh, you need help with this or you need help with that, or no, I have photos of this. And like sometimes just random messages from people like, hey, I came across your podcast and I know you were talking about this. I work for I work or
Yeah.
volunteer at the 92nd Bomb Group Museum out in England. And hey, here's some pictures of Clubmobiles,
yeah.
So
just
cool.
random. And it's like so, so cool. And then you start to fall down more rabbit holes like, oh, okay, so who was the Clubmobile that served at the 92nd?
Names, and then you create your own community, and
Exactly that. Yes. And it's such a
it
great thing. It really is so much fun.
they're so like everybody. I am fortunate that, the people who are into research also kind of recognize and acknowledge the work that can go into finding, like, building your group, your panel of experts. And this person I have a connection with knows these things, and this person I have a connection with has
Hmm.
access to these things. And I think I'm really fortunate, especially when it's a hard time to be a federal employee,
Mm,
that,
Yeah,
you know, in general, people are gracious and grateful, and that really helps continue to make the job of being in history and being in, liberal arts at large, and studying the important diverse history that makes, history exciting and important and fun and relatable. I
mm,
mean, we all have read those stories where we're like, oh, this person has the same personality I do, and they're doing this thing. I didn't know that was a thing I could do.
right.
Or like really empowering each other and telling those different stories that weave that fabric that we continue to grow on. I mean, the WAF's story again is such a great one because they have like this incredible, they fought their own fight. They literally used their own records to fight and take it to Congress.
They
And
did.
when Jackie Cochran failed, come on. I mean, that's incredible. That's such an impressive story. But then, you know, 1977, we're post Vietnam. And we have women coming home from Vietnam being told women didn't serve in the war. I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
saved your life. You would not have come home if it weren't for me, but
mm-hmm.
sure, okay. And so like that story continues. And that's why I think those building stones, those fabrics, those shoulders we climb on are so essential to continuing to say, how do I do this different? How do I do this successfully? What
yeah,
worked, what didn't work? And, if it's not for that network in that community, and, I think that's why this World War II community feels like that too.
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. It's so interesting that you say like, when Jackie Cochran failed, right? Because now we're diving into a little bit, we're diving into the ATA and the women who flew with the ATA. And it's so interesting. The Jackie Cochran story is something that I always feel like I feel like I love her, but I hate her. And it's like she's a very complex person
Mm,
because I'm
Yeah.
like, did you did you kind of like throw these girls into the ATA and then walk away on purpose, or did you do it because you saw this opportunity and you knew they would be okay over there and you could walk away? Did
Yeah.
did her ego maybe hinder the progression of the WASP and the militarization of the WASP? They had that opportunity to join up with the Women's Army Corps and be militarized, and you know, was she too greedy? You had this opportunity, it was right there. Were you too greedy? Her story is something that I'm always like, oh my God, I get so angry. And then I'm like, oh, but she did this,
Yeah.
but I get so angry.
Yeah.
I think
And
it's fascinating in a study of a person, and then you have
yeah,
that specific duality with Nancy
hmm,
Harkness Love, and
yes,
I would say actually my personality more closely aligned with Jackie's, and so it's fascinating to me to see her trajectory and to see the areas where I consider this was an ego problem, this was a this problem, this was a
right,
whatever. Um, but then to also know that that woman had this like crazy life trajectory,
Mm.
right, that too.
like I am a staunch advocate for therapy. It's like a saving grace in my life. And like, what would different access to mental health, different access to, I mean, a support network in terms of like, raising her as a person. Her childhood was diverse. Jackie Cochran she has a fascinating personality that's beget of this. I mean, she is in the like non-excuse way of you're a product of your era.
Yeah,
There was definitely some hard stuff going on, and then Nancy has a hard life after, and she struggles with everything. And I mean, I really do, like I said, I am fascinated by where those turns happen and what's happening in society at this time. And Jackie really builds this like through her own both like vivaciousness, but
mm,
also like her tenacity. She pushes forward, she makes her life what it needs to be. She I don't know, she makes some errors, but also I always want to be like, what was your panic? What was your actual fear here? What did you need to retain in this denial to other people? And you know, what a life and what a story. And like I said, my personality aligns more closely to Jackie. So when she makes some of these like busting through doors and making these alliances and making this stuff happen and not taking no for an answer and leaving this deluge of troubled men in her wake, like that's great. That's relatable for me. But then also, it's such a good lesson for me to be like, okay, tenacity is not the only approach to things. Sometimes there's
right,
finesse, and really learning those like as an adult functioning person in society, where does confrontation not work and where does confrontation work?
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's this huge thing with her that I've like started to take note of, and there's a different version of her story everywhere. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
in Silver Wings, it's a great story, but it's different to the one that we're reading in Spitfires at the moment.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
when I went to the Museum of Flight here in Seattle, there is like a ghost written book. It's an autobiography, but it's written by somebody else, and it's 100 and something pages listing all of her achievements, which is great. But when
Yes.
you have read everything else, you're like,
Is that the one that her
mm,
niece published?
I believe so. There's
I
two
remember Dr. Kate saying that her
biographies.
niece put one of them out, but I don't remember which one it
Yeah,
was.
I don't remember which
That
one it was.
that's that exact complication to me. I'm always diving into books to saying, did you look at a personnel record?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because the oral histories have natural subjective bias in them. This is my life through my lens. And
Right.
and you're somebody who like is pretty self-aware or, emotionally intelligent in such a way, which I mean, we don't have access to this at these times. Um, I think that you can balance those stories out by finding that record. And that's that historical journey and that, thread that you pull of like, how can I confirm this? Where can I
Right.
find this information? Another woman who like fits this narrative is Bessie Coleman, who is a very early female pilot. And she like we got a request for her record years ago. And when I started pulling the thread of like, okay, I need more information than Bessie Coleman and trying to find out her biographic story. She got a lot of different last names over time. There's a
Mhm.
lot of unsure, is this her in the record? Is this her in the record? Where do I put these data points together to kind of find that true through line? And so I
Right,
think those
right.
stories like, having these ghostwriters and having this story and having this story told are really fascinating. And that's the thing that like one day somebody's going to discover some document somewhere that confirms or denies this part of the story.
Right.
And we don't know yet. And
Mm.
that's why history is still viable. And that's why history is dynamic and it's not static,
Yeah.
continues to be interpreted. And that interpretive work continues to be really important.
Mm. Yeah.
Definitely.
Um, do you have a favorite piece of World War II media? Like on screen, do you have a favorite book? Um, and also it's like a two-parter, I guess. How did you feel about Masters of the Air? Because we have such 50-50 opinions
Right.
on that.
And we only ask about Masters of the Air because we've asked you to dig into Bremen.
Yeah.
So I think it's only
You
right if we ask you about
Mm.
the most
know,
recent of the three big ones, I
so,
guess. The big
guys,
three.
listen to your Q&A episode, and it's so funny, Winnie, because I also was vehemently opposed to watching the Elvis movie because I was like,
Oh,
I had a great aunt
Still
who
haven't
was a,
watched it. Sorry to Austin Butler.
well, see, that's the thing. And Winnie specifically, you said, I don't think I could have watched Elvis first and then Masters of the Air.
Hmm.
yeah.
And I now feel like I could having it, but it's in my to be watched queue. It's in
Mm.
my
Mine
ad
too.
list. Um,
It's
Let
so
me know when you
good.
decide to take the leap because I'll do it too, and then we can compare
It is
notes.
so good, but if you watch him as Gail Clevin and then you watch Elvis after, you're like, hang on, this is not even the same man.
Yeah, so I
Um,
finally I refuse to even watch the trailer because I music is like a huge influence in my life. It's such
Hmm.
a like I said, it was one of those early like you could point to, oh, she's
yeah.
actually into history and research in such a way.
Right.
And I think that like I had my own Elvis phase as I'm finding my own music and um so I think like I don't know. I really a favorite piece of World War II media. I would say like probably it hasn't been made yet, like we're not seeing women's story told very often.
Right.
I did watch the Tyler Perry 6888 movie.
How do you feel about that? Because we were a bit iffy. We were
It
like, mm,
it was an artistic interpretation.
Ooh,
agreed.
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did
we didn't think of that. We were like, eh.
It
movie
was
literally.
not the
Uh,
historical movie.
Also, we have those records, and so
Right.
thankfully, it beget an article that I wrote about the 6888 using
Wonderful.
our and
Yeah.
kind of talk about, um. So, I mean, I guess in some way, the answer to your question is my favorite piece of World War II media is the records that exist. Like,
Listen,
It's a great answer.
that's a great answer. That's a great answer.
but I mean, because I mean, so I'm gonna talk about my favorite piece that you can find in a record, my favorite individual page that's found in some personnel records is an effects list. And it's a little morbid, and it's always going to go morbid for me. My communications team, they're going to be like, "Oh, Kara got to death. There it is. We found it." Um, but the personal effects list that can be found in some of these personnel files, and it lists the things that they had in their rooms. It lists the things, and it's true for the 6888. One of them had a freaking sword So cool. You had a sword in your personal effects?
That's
Come on.
amazing.
Also a Bible. That combination is incredible to me.
A
As a
sword and a
non
Bible.
yeah,
Okay.
I love that.
I'm
do it.
trying to picture how, how are we using both of these at the same time? Probably
Yes.
not at the same time.
We'll see. What kind of fight are we fighting today?
Yeah, we'll find a way.
Hmm.
Which literal demons will we slay? Um, but then also particularly I find them compelling in women because it'll be like Revlon number 2 compact. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. It's such a specific, and you can find them for any, I mean, the Red Cross has them in because we have some records, if they died in service and the army handled their burial, those records will exist there. The women's air service pilots had such cool ones. Because it'll be like flight suit and 3 going out dresses. I'm like, incredible. A man wrote this.
Definitely. Definitely.
Um, I mean, there's a lot of media that I really like a lot. Cadillac Records is probably one of my favorite movies. I think I mean, Beyonce's in it. Come on. So, tells such a good story of relations and people in the music industry. And it's loosely based on chess records, so it's really in my era. But I don't know. I mean, I've seen I've seen a lot of them. I do tend to stay in the kind of like World War II era.
Hmm.
I just read a book called Book and Dagger, and it's about the Office of Strategic Service and how they entered World War II without a strong like spy base. And I always love a good spy story. I'm a
Mm.
sucker for a mystery novel, especially if there's murder involved. Cue me in. Um, but it talks about how we didn't have a strong spy base, and so we use historians and archivists because they're the only ones who already know this information and they know about cultures, and we can drop a person who has studied German history into Germany, and they'll know which cultural cues they need to stick to. Or you can drop this librarian who is really well versed in what journals exist and come out and will tell you what you actually want to know about what's happening in Germany, and she can go in, and it's a really great book. Um that's a big one for me. So Masters of the Air, I was not going to watch. Again, because I was like, I don't really need another story about World War II white men, you
Mm.
know? Um, and then my boss at the time, Ben, he is a veteran and he and I have real similar personalities. He was such a great mentor and guide, and he was interested in it. And so I kind of watched it so that we could have that conversation. And then we got connected with the author and executive producer, one of the executive producers, I guess. I don't know how movies work or TV shows, but then I did watch it, and then I was like immediately did the same thing I said earlier, being like, oh, we have all these records and we know how all of this works, and I can go in and confirm each little data point here. Um, and so that was really cool to get to explore this area that again I've like been really intent on expanding my knowledge base about. And it's so cool to see the small ways in which they like try. And I haven't read the book. I'm like a quarter of the way through it, but
Same.
in
It's taken us a year so far, and
It's
I'm
taking me a year
halfway.
and I'm not even halfway through. It's very
Tone.
dense. I find that it's like reading through like a history textbook.
Yeah,
Not so
I'm
much
not
like Band of
joking.
Brothers was, where like you could see it unfolding on the page, but
part of that's because it is a true
mhm,
Mm.
history. It is a true history
it is,
text.
and it's more 8th Air Force driven than just strictly 100th Bomb Group.
Yeah.
The way that it talks about like
Yeah.
it's very specific. And I think I actually use that text to help me study Bremen because like The 8th Air Force is a crazy broad term. The
Hmm.
100th Bomber Group is a crazy broad term. And so when I looked at Bremen specifically, I really had to dig in. And, there were some characters I was familiar with because of Masters of the Air, because of studying kind of what
Right.
all that touches. And so like I'm already familiar with the Crosby story. And I'm like, okay, so I can take this one data point and I can find the other ones because I really needed to know specifically what unit they served with so I could get that unit level information. So then I can confirm what this crew is. And I mean, when we're talking about like this plane, but drilling that down
Hmm.
is, I mean, it's an intensive amount of research,
Mm.
but then it teaches me about the records and the holdings and then seeing the trajectory of some of those individuals who survived this mission and then die later and continue on, and like they're the one plane that comes back, or what planes don't come back. And so I think having watched Masters of the Air and then back pursuing the specificity of Bremen itself made Masters of the Air more illuminating to me, in the sense of like, how do you take a true narrative and do an artistic interpretation of it?
Mm.
And I mean, now there, even if there are divergences from the true storyline, it is introducing concepts to a general public platform. And I mean, there is increased research surrounding it and getting to correct things that were done wrong the first go round, and encouraging people. I mean, there's not a ton of books written about like the Women's Air Service pilots. There's not a ton of books written about code breakers. There's not a ton of books written about like the World War I telephone operators, the Hello Girls,
Hmm.
or the Donut Dollies. There's not a ton, but there's more than one. And
Mhm.
I think that's really important, because when you tell that story and you keep telling that story, it encourages people to understand those interpretations continue in an important way. And there's always room for more interpretation, you know? And so I think that Masters of the Air is, I mean, Crosby wrote his own book.
Yeah.
So to take that and to say, I can build on this, that I am a big fan of.
Mm.
Yeah, of course, there were some things about it that were like, oh, you could have looked at this. Oh, you could have looked at this, and added to that story or padded that story out. I mean, when we talked to the author and the executive producer, and we're using our records to kind of illuminate that talk. There were things that I know weren't used in the writing of that text that we got to show, and that was very fun and fulfilling. And so, Masters of the Air, I think, has now a special place for me because it has done something for me and my growth and my understanding. Um, but it continues to be I mean, I find like even when I'm reading on my own, I can do like historical text, historical text, historical text. Now I need a novel,
Yeah.
Yeah.
need a break from that. And so, I mean, even I can go the other way too, where I find myself in like World War II female spy genre. And I'll get like 3 in a row, and then I'll be like, I can't read this again. I can't read this. Like, I know too much about the history
Yeah.
to read another one of these. Or like I'm too mad. My friend Kristen Phillips always tells me I should write a book because
Mhm.
no, this is the actual story and it's more interesting. It's more
Mhm.
compelling to me. Um, so there's a lot of that. I don't know. I don't know if I could drill down a specific piece of like World War II media that I put on repeat, or
Mm.
that I go to. I just read The Women, which my yoga instructor recommended to me. So she was right on the money. Um,
Mm.
My aunt has been
and that's
telling me I need to read it for. months. And I'm like, I
It's
promise. And every time I get ready to open up a new book, it's like, we're going to read this because, book club or, it's
Mhm.
research for something that we're doing for the podcast. And I'm like, all right, this book's going to sit on the back burner again. My
Yeah.
God,
I ended
again.
I'm a huge proponent of listening is reading. However you get this, you get this.
Mm.
Um,
Right. So
I
long as
ended
you
up
consume it. Yes, I agree.
had to take breaks when I was listening to it because it was heavy and it is a novel. It's not
Yeah.
uh, nonfiction, but I think that author does a really good job making it accessible and approachable, regardless of where you are on the level of like
Mhm.
into history or critical thinking, or I mean, it can be both a novel and a historical text.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it will have you starting to ask those questions of like, I mean, she covers class, she covers race, she covers gender. It's really good. I mean, in terms of like just introducing those
Right.
topics. Um, so that's probably the most recent one. I keep looking at my bookshelf to be like,
Like, what else is there?
um, anything that talks about St. Louis, I'll always pull a thread on. I'm very
Mm.
fascinated with history. I think St. Louis as a city is it's like this little big city, and it's such a unique community. It's such a unique access point of being like we have the amenities that a big city has. We have an airport, Um I've never grown up having to drive 3 hours to an airport. And what does that mean? And, it's just right across the river. Um, but it also, I has so many small town feels. Like we're very Midwestern. We're very,
Mm.
we, we know the neighborhoods and, so I love St. Louis. And so anything that kind of starts to pull on that thread and tell that story and how it fits in a national conversation, that'll
Mm.
always get me. There was a really good one about Pruitt-Igoe, which was a neighborhood that was specifically to serve a Black community and just fraught with issues. And like, how does something like that happen? I love that
Yeah.
story. Um, Now I'm looking at my records over here. I have like
Do you
my
have
favorite.
a little pen for it? You really are Charlie Day.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only um yeah, I don't know. I would say anytime you tell me a story of an underdog,
Mm.
likely that's my hook.
Yeah. I think we're very much the same.
Definitely.
Mm. I think that is an excellent place to wrap up. Cara, thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been excellent, and I'm so glad
We had
that
such a great time
I'm so
finally
glad
getting
we
to
get
sit
to,
down and talk with
yeah.
you, not just over email either.
I'm such a bad emailer too. Like,
No, you're very good. You're
No,
just
you're
busy.
very good. You're very good. We are just we chronically check our email because the,
oh, you
Sometimes
got
you
it.
miss
Yeah.
unfortunately
it.
we're that generation where we chronically sometimes will sit with the phone in our
Mhm.
hand. But no,
Yeah.
this was so much fun.
I can't have like I'm a no notifications person. It's a hard life.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the
I try
same.
to
I
limit
just
them.
can't
I
do
do.
both.
I try to limit them.
Yeah, I'm the
Otherwise,
same.
I'd be like stuck glued to my phone. Like,
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we
thank you
will see you next
guys.
time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.